Hello, my name is Olivia Cobb, and I chose to do my project on an artifact over the Alamo. So why did I choose this building? As an Army brat, I have not really spent much time in Texas before deciding to come to college here, and I had no clue how the Alamo tied to Texas history and how it was important. I had heard of it, but I really didn't know much about it. So I thought I'd educate myself to become a overall better Texan and to know these stories that my Texan classmates have grown up knowing. So what is the significance behind the Alamo? The Battle of the Alamo was from February 23rd, 1836 to March 6th, 1836 during the Texas Revolution. This 13-day battle happened at the Alamo, and it's how this building became so famous because of this monumental battle during the Texas Revolution. So the Texas Revolution, or the War of Texas Independence, was a year-long war fought between 1835 and 1836. Texas colonists were fighting against Mexico for their freedom and independence, and they actually won, which resulted in the founding of the Republic of Texas. So what exactly happened during the Battle of the Alamo that made this building so important? So during December of 1835, a group of Texas volunteers went south to occupy the Alamo building. These troops were led by James Bowie, William Travis, and Davy Crockett. These troops served as a blockade as the Mexican troops were traveling north to Texas. They stood there to stall the Mexican troops so that the rest of the Texan military could improve and could become prepared for the war and the battles that were happening. It gave Texans time because they stood as a blockade. They were incredibly outnumbered, and the battle stood as a symbol for resistance and determination for freedom because these Texas volunteers gave their life and sacrificed themselves for the overall good of Texas, and because they did so, Texas had enough time to, create a better army and become more prepared for these battles, which led to their independence, because on April 21st, 1836, Sam Houston's soldiers won the Battle of San Jacinto and secured Texas independence. But their battle cry for this just huge pivotal event was "Remember the Alamo," because without those sacrifices made by those Texas volunteers, we would not be where we were today, and Texas would not have been able to become independent. So more about the building structure. So the structure was originally built as a chapel for the mission San Antonio de Valero in 1718. And the purpose of the mission was actually to be a religious sanctuary and industrial trade school for Native Americans. So the first picture on top was how the building was supposed to turn out. It was supposed to have two tower-like structures on either side, as most chapels did during that time, but because of storms, they would build a little bit up and then storms would knock it down, and they just kept this vicious cycle. And so eventually they just stopped rebuilding the towers, and it was never really built to the full extent, because the bottom picture is how the Alamo is today and how they basically left it. So the purpose of the Alamo throughout history has actually been quite interesting. I knew that there was a battle fought there, but I didn't know all of these amazing things that this building has stood for. So yes, originally it was built as a chapel in 1718, but in 1778, actually it became almost uninhabited because there was such widespread disease in Texas that there were not enough people to maintain this building. So much so that in 1793, people started volunteering, and it started becoming a self-supporting church because there wasn't enough upkeep to pay people to come and work there. So from 1806 to 1812, because of the upkeep that started in the 1790s, it actually served as San Antonio's first hospital. And then from 1810 onward, up until the end of the Civil War, this building has changed hands 16 different times between different ownerships of Texans, Spaniards, Mexican, Union, and Confederate forces who have all tried to take control and own this building, because if you owned the Alamo, you owned the heart of Texas. So this building stood as such an important and monumental piece in, Texas pride and Texas history. So the Alamo today has now been converted into a museum, and it's actually part of the Alamo Plaza Historic District in San Antonio. You can tour the buildings along with little barracks behind that the priests used to live in when it was originally a chapel. And there's pictures and murals all encased in glass that you can see. And there's different artifacts that have been collected in this building throughout Texas history. And it's just a really great place to go. All the reviews said it was great. I hope I can visit it one day. And these are my sources that I used. Thank you. I hope you enjoyed.